So who in this room has written a component before? Anyone? Okay, you can go now. It's an easy word for beginners. Who in this room has PHP knowledge? Okay, most of you. Who in this room has worked with classes and inheritance and other things like that? Ooh, that's not many. That's going to make things harder. Who wrote a model? Anyone? Oh, that's a lot. Who wrote a plugin? That's a minority. Interesting. Okay, it's interesting. In Joomla, most people start with plugins. And actually, plugins are the hardest way and the hardest type of extension Joomla has. Yes, you can write in one row and one method all stuff you need, but actually, technically, they're the most difficult one to implement, and they're going to change in Joomla 4 a lot. So let's start on working on our extension now. We're going to write a component, no model, no plugin, and the first step, when you want to start a project, is creating a folder. I'm using Linux, so I'm typing it in the command line, but it's no issue at all. And I'm going to create a new component called a new folder called JW17. And when we look at the content, we now have an empty folder. And who's familiar with the structure of Joomla, of the folders? Oh, not all of you. Okay, then we should take a look first. That's that. So the structure of Joomla is quite easy. This is a Joomla installation, and we have folders like administrator, components, installation, includes, and so on. Where you mostly work with, as when you develop a component, is administrator and components and media. If you're developing a plugin, you of course work with the plugins folder. If you're developing a model, you work with the model folder. In all these folders, or in all these different types of extensions, the structure is actually different. For components, it's quite straightforward. Let's take an example. In the administrator folder, we have the main structure mirrored. So in this, we have components again. And then we have the components like components. You have a component like components, and in that, you have the files for the component. So the structure of a component is always the same. Administrator, components, component name. So when we want to start with that, we just start with an empty folder, as I have showed you before. So let's find that. JWC17, good morning. And if you start writing a component, you don't want to do that directly in a Joomla installation, because else you would need to move the whole installation on GitHub, or when you distribute your package, you would need to decouple all the files out of the Joomla installation. So what we do when we create a component is we mirror the Joomla folder structure into our own extension. So we're going to create a new folder, and in that we first do a folder called source. And when you're going to start a component, you always need at least the backend part. You can have no front end, but you need the backend part. So the backend part starts with administrator. In that we create the folder components. And all components start with com underscore. And now we put the component name in there, like com JWC17. So next we switch to a development environment. I suggest you use PHPStorm. There are a lot of other out there too, like NetBeans, Eclipse, or other things, but PHPStorm, at least in the Joomla community, is the most common. They even have Joomla support, which is really great from them. And for that I'm going to open the project I just created. And who in this room had worked with PHPStorm before? Oh, that's Marty too. Who has never worked with an integrated development editor? With an IDE, like NetBeans, Eclipse, anything? Who's still using Notepad++ or whatever we have? Or Sublime. Sublime is quite common. Or Win. Okay, so most of you did. That's a nice thing. So we have our folder structure here, and the naming of what we need next is quite straightforward, but you don't do all the stuff yourself. You start by using a sample, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to set up an external library by clicking right on external libraries. Then we are going to add Joomla. I have prepared one, so that's easy. When you do this, as we are going to write for Joomla 3, you have still the minimum support of PHP 5.3. When you are doing that, you have now the code completion ready for Joomla. Because PHPStorm now automatically uses the included folder here. And you need at least 2 files to get your extension running. One is easy. I can do that without a template. One is a entry point PHP file, and it has to be called like the component without com in front. So in our case, it has to be JWC17. That's the main entry point into our component for Joomla. So let's create that, and I'm just going to write echo hello world here. So we have that file now, and that would be enough. In terms of PHP code, this is totally enough. You can start now here all your output if you want, but we want to do a bit more. But
can you zoom in a bit possible?
I can try. That's not as easy as it sounds. No, that's not the issue.
Set the mouse wheel scroll.
Size override. So, is this better in the backend? In the back? Marco, in the backend. Marco, can you read that?
No, your modal is blocking the source view.
I didn't change the source view yet. It's just on the... Okay. Because the other one is here.
Yeah, I know.
This should be enough, shouldn't it? I know it's really small screen for a room that big. Okay, everyone can read that now, hopefully. Even Marco.
Yeah, you didn't like and the compressor.
Okay, so in terms of PHP code, that would be enough. That's a working component already. But now we need to solve another thing, and that's how is this component going to be installed. Yeah. And for that, we need a manifest file. Manifest file is just an XML file with information about the component. As this file is containing a lot of more information, I'm going to copy it and we're going to go through it. It also has to have the same name as a component folder has without com in front of it. So it's going to be JWC 7.xml. So there's a lot of code now in that file. You don't need most of that. For the beginning, let's change the version, because we are not going to be working before 3.7 or 3.8. We can change the name here. Normally you keep it like the component is. It's still translatable. It's automatically uppercase, and if you have a language string, com JWC 17, it's going to be translated in anything you want. So next is author. I'm not going to change that. We have a creation date, we have a copyright license, author email, author URL, a version string, a description. Whenever you see things like that, com underscore honors XML description, this is a string for multi-language. I'm going to show you a bit later how this is working. In summary, you just have to put it in the right language file. But for now, we just can do an English description here. So after that, there would be a real big block of SQL files. We don't need that at all. After that, we have files folder site. We don't have one. So it's gone. What we want to is a menu entry, and that's done in the administration. So if we want to show up in the menu, I just can remove that image. It's not shown anyways, except in old templates. As you know, the backend template is not showing at the moment. In Joomla 4 it does, but at the moment it's not showing any images when you click down somewhere. So let's just change that to JW17 rocks. And you can also have a submenu, which is not important for our sample here. Maybe later, but I don't think so. We have a files folder admin. Yes, we have. And in that we have just JW17 PHP, JW17 XML, and I'm going just to remove all the other stuff here for now. So languages, all out of it. So that's a very basic manifest. You could even get rid of the files folder for now. For development, it's not important what you put in here. It's for the installation. So now we need to get our extension linked to the Joomla installation. You can do that multiple ways. Easiest, in my opinion, is symlinking them into the installation. You can either do that manually, what we are going to do now, or you can use some software like JoRobo or other nice frameworks for that. When you have a big component, doing that manually is no fun. So I would suggest if you're starting on something bigger, it's that you use some of the tools we can automate. So when we look at the structure again, I need to actually symlink administrator components com JWC17 in a running Joomla instance. So let's do that. On Linux, it's the following. Com JWC17 save JWC17 administrator components. So what we do is we match the structure of a live Joomla instance and link our component in that. So that's that. It's a bit small, I know, but it's just a link. It's just Linux specific, and I don't think most of you use Linux here. And Marco has a question.
A remark.
Yeah.
Should you start trying this afterwards? Beware that on Windows it's a bit
Make
different.
link.
If you want some details, just ask me. there's some stuff that should work and doesn't work, so
So,
not going to elaborate on it now.
so on Windows, you have to use mklinks, that's for sure. But I can also show you a nice library. Let's hope Google finds it. It does. Which does all of that for you, also in Windows, with some easy to use command like this one. So if you are starting developing extensions, I would suggest you take a look into that. When we have some time at the end, probably not, but then I'm going to show that library. Because it's a great library and it makes your life easier. It's not only for symlinking, it has a lot of other stuff to offer too. So I created the link. I already have a site set up. I know it's too small as always. I'm going to go into the backend of Joomla now. One, two, three, of course. After that, we have that nice discover option in Joomla. It's not quite often used except for developers, and there you are. You can see it automatically discovered the tiny bit of code we did. It discovered the manifest file. And now I just have to install it by clicking here and going on install. And you can see discover install successful. You could even have your own messages here, do database creation, or even more. You can create a whole installer if you want. So after that, we have it in the menu. And when I click on it, we see hello world. So for that, that's a component in Joomla. You could do now any stuff in there, and there are a lot of components which did that back in the 1.0 times or 1.5 times, because you basically can now code everything. That's your entry point, and you have PHP, do what you want. Of course, that's not always the best idea, because I have seen extensions which are having 10,000 lines of code in this single entry file. And that's not the idea of the whole thing. Because of that, in Joomla 1.5, the Joomla MVC framework was introduced. Who heard of that already? That's not so many. Who knows what MVC in general is? Okay, that's almost everyone. Okay, MVC. The Joomla one is not quite the one you are used to then. It's about separating controlling, that's the C, controller. So controlling means you get a task, save an article. That's what's picked up by a controller, and the controller then gets to the model and runs the save method. That would be the ideal model. Or if we want to show something, like a page, the task would be display. We are displaying content here. So the controller gets a task, display. That's the default task in Joomla. Gets a view for that, asks the model for data, and then we see something. That would be the perfect model, perfect way to have it. In Joomla, it's not 100% perfect because the view and the model are coupled a bit tight together. But that's not an issue for you. So when we look at MVC, I'm going to show you a nice figure because that's going to make your life easier. I like it that my Google is on Italian now. We can use that one. And I'll try to make it big. Here you can see again, controller model view. One interesting thing you're going to learn in Joomla is you actually only need a view. You can go with model view controller. Not every view you're going to create needs a model, or you can always go with the default JLegacy controller, which I'm going to show in a minute. everyone is aware of what a view is in Joomla. Or not in technical perspective, but you have seen that in your URLs, didn't you? So, for example, when I go in the backend, I navigate to articles. There's no view here, because at this moment, the default view is used, and it's called articles. But when I click on getting started, you can see view equals article. And this is defining the view of the component we are looking at. So how does that all work? We have the article view here. We request that address, Joomla jumps in, Joomla starts up, then it starts looking for an option, which we have here. Option is content. It takes the option and then redirects the rendering, the creation of the main content to that component, in our case content. Content takes that up, starts up the MVC framework, looks if it has any task to do or anything else. There's no task in this address, as you can notice. There's just a view, and the view is article, and the default task, if none is set, is display. So what is done in total? The controller gets the task display for the view article, and the article view gets the data from the model and loads as content. So we have a separation. We have tasks for every single part, and that's the hardest thing to understand in the beginning. So let's make it a bit more practical before it gets too theoretical. In here, we need to start with going away from this procedural code. I could write anything in here and go into the Joomla MVC. For that, we need one controller first. And that's why I'm asked in the beginning if you have experience with inheritance, because we're going to create a class. And the class name is also fixed. We have a clear class name structure in our case, which is JWC17 controller. So this is not doing much. This has no functionality. We don't see a display functionality here or anything else. So we could now start writing that and invent our own MVC framework, but we can also get all the code from Joomla itself. And we get that by extending JController legacy. Thanks, code completion. I really like the code completion here. It's there, it's just a glitch because of 3.8. Long story. So we are extending JController legacy, and that's it. That's our controller now. You don't have to do more. So inheritance means we get all the functionality JController legacy is offering us. And when we look at JController legacy, we need to look at the base controller now. There we are. This is the controller, JController legacy. Don't get confused by the naming here. It's related to the change in 3.8, which brought some stuff from Joomla 4 back. But it's still JController legacy. And when we look at that, we have a lot of stuff here. And I can just show the function outline. And if we look at the function outline, there's one, which I already mentioned, the display task. And this display task is the one that takes over if you follow the MVC structure. You can override it, of course. Inheritance means you can also override stuff which is in here. Sometimes you need to. But for most cases, you are done with a simple controller like that, and you earn all the things you have here. So when we get to that, the next step is, that's it for now. So the next step is going in here and bootstrapping the controller. And I'm going to copy these lines because they're quite copy and paste and always the same, but I'm going to explain them. We get a controller, JController legacy get instance. In our case, it's not spanners, but it's again JWC17. We control a task in the controller, execute, which is most times displayed, but it could be also save, do this, do that, whatever we want that. And then we do a redirect. That's all you need to get your component into the MVC. So let's see what this code is now going to bring us. Anyone has an idea before I hit reload? Victor, probably. An error, of course. Why? We have no view, but we are in the MVC. We have no view specified in the URL, so it's looking now for a view, which is called again the same as our component. We see, I make it a bit larger for you. As you can see, we have view not found, name type prefix, JWC, HTML, view. A lot of stuff which happens in Joomla in the components looks like magic in the beginning. And that's a hard thing. That's really making it hard because you need to trust the system to work for you. You have to follow the conventions you have in Joomla, from naming over file structure and so on and so on. That's the thing that makes doing a component more difficult. But for that, you get hundreds and thousands of lines of code which are working for you. And you can develop an application easy and fast. So actually, I think a view called JWC17 sucks. That's not a good view name. Let's do something more funny. But where can we define that? Of course, when I now add view here, it now tries to open the thanks view. But the entry point of our component when we go through the menu is still JWC17 view. And we can change that. And now we are going back to inheritance. That's why I'm asked in the beginning. We got all the functionality from JController legacy. And in JController legacy, in the base controller, we have one single thing in the beginning, and it's called default view. If the default view is not set, it takes the component name, JWC17 view. If we set it, it takes whatever we wanted. So as a sample how to overwrite stuff, I'm just going to copy this line here and now change that to rocks. And what happens now is that our default view is no longer JWC17 but rocks. That's it. So next step, getting that view finally working. For that, we need to create a new folder in here, views. And in this views folder, all the views of our component are going to be placed. And in the views folder, we now have to create a folder rocks because we told Joomla to look for a view called rocks. So let's do that. And in this, we need a PHP file, which is called view.html.php. View is fixed, HTML isn't, because we have different output formats. We can output HTML, but we can also output JSON. And HTML means not that we are outputting raw HTML, but we are putting HTML in Joomla itself. So with a view HTML PHP, you are using the normal backend. So let's look at that. The class naming, we already saw that here, needs to be rocks HTML JWC 17 view. So we're going to create that class JWC 17 view rocks. It's always the same. Once you got that scheme, you can always apply that. And it's not only for views like that, it's for models, it's for controllers. Why do we need that? Else the autoloading wouldn't work. So we're creating a class again, and of course, because we don't want to write all the stuff which happens in a view ourselves, that would be thousands of lines of code, we are again extending a base class. Oh, and please don't wonder on the naming legacy. JView legacy is the old new view. In Joomla 3 there was the idea to create a new MVC structure, which was basically just interfaces, and you had to build on top of that. In Joomla 4 we're going to remove all of that again, and the JView legacy, JModel legacy and JController legacy are then going to be called base controller and so on. You saw that already. So it's not legacy. It's a new legacy. It's a new stuff you need to use. So let's keep it to that and see what comes out now. It was found. We get a new error. And now it says layout default not found. Because a view has two parts. One is a class where we extend JView legacy, and one is the actual stuff where you do your output. And for that you have layout files. Most of you have seen them already or overwritten them. And for that we need a new folder here called templater, TMPR. And in that we're going to place a new file called default PHP. No, not a directory, sorry. Screwed that. It's really hard to work with a mouse on that thing here. So we're going to create a new PHP file, default PHP. And this one is different. It does not even have to contain PHP at all. It should, but I come back to that later, at least one line. But for now, I can just delete that, go out of PHP and, I don't know, say hello world again, hello JWC 17. And let's look at the output. There we are again. That's really easy. And it's for every view you want to create, it's the same now. I'm going to create a second view in a minute. Let's just copy that, rocks, to thanks. The only thing you have to do now is JW view rocks, change rocks to thanks. And then we can say thank you JWC 17. And to view that, so this content didn't change. To view the other thing, we just go to view thanks. So creating views is straightforward once you got to that. You can now do a lot of content there. So, and we didn't create a controller or a model at all. So the next step we can do is first look at a security thing. If you want to publish your extension in the JET, you're required to do that, but you should always do that. It's a PHP file. When you know the path, so you can go in your browser to administrator components and so on to that file. You can call that PHP file directly in the browser without going over Joomla. And that's a security issue. Because of that, on every file, PHP file you create, you should put the following at the top, and it's defined JExec or die. You can put a message in there.
Nice try.
Nice try, whatever, yeah. How's that working? Defined is looking for a constant, and it's returning true if it is there. It's returning false if it isn't. And Joomla defines Z constant in the beginning of the boot progress. So whenever someone tries to access a file directly, it dies in the first line. So for our, I need to remove some few things. Here it makes no difference because Joomla defined it. If I try to open it directly, it is. So this is one of the crucial stuff you need. If you, and there's a lot of other security related things too. And there was a good session by David talking about that here at JWC, and it's already live in the videos. If you start developing in an extension or even a model or plugin, that's the first thing you should look on. Because we have enough hacked sites in the internet, you don't want to add more. Yeah?
How can you choose the default view, the first view that comes out when you code components in administration?
You're a bit. I need to get to you one minute.
Sorry. How do you choose the default view, the first view that comes out when you...
This is not.
Okay. Default view, okay.
Default view.
I missed it.
You override the default view in JController legacy. If you don't, it's named after the component. It's JW17. If you do, it's in our case false. So, how much time do we have left?
Half an hour.
Half an hour? Half an hour? Okay, perfect. So, we created these two views. What we don't have now is any kind of toolbar, which is a bit sad. And we don't even have a title, and we destroyed the layout a bit because Joomla does not like it when your extension, your component, does not put up a title. So because of that, this is going to be the next step. And for that, in JWC 17 rocks, we have to override the display method and then call it again. So we have a public function display, and this is a parent one. And who's not understanding this code? It's PHP. It has nothing to do with Joomla, these lines. Everyone has seen parent before, because that means... So we are overwriting the default display method, which had a bunch of code. And with parent display, we call it again. So what we do here is we put code before the parent, the JView legacy method display is called. So, and in here we can do stuff, like we can call the JToolbar helper and set the title, which is also the Wi-Fi password if you forgot. Oh, good catch.
I see it.
So, and now the layout looks a lot better. In the title method, you could also add an icon and all the other things around that. So, what could we do next? Maybe we want to have some toolbar buttons. And for that, it's a JToolbar too. So, JToolbar helper allows you to add, for example, add new task. And I'm just going to add it like this. Put a semicolon at the end of the line if I manage to. And let's look at what happened now. We have a new button. And if I'm going to click that button, any ideas what's going to happen?
Nothing.
No. Nothing. Nothing happened. Because we are missing something. All these buttons, toolbar buttons, are adjusted to Joomla. And when you use toolbar buttons, Joomla expects of you that you have a form tag in your view, and we don't have that. So let's try to get that working. For that we switch back to the default PHP and we create a form. Thanks, code completion. Good morning. Thanks. And the form action is always index.php, the entry file of Joomla. And after that we can add the option JWC17. We can even add a view if we want to, but for me that's enough. And we need to have another thing in this form, and at least one. And it needs to be, we need to have an input which is hidden with the name task. These task words, we're going to look at that in a second. And we need something else. When you create a form, you do need to set a method. I wouldn't do get anymore in any modern forms. And we should give the form a name and ID. So let's check what happens now. Nothing, but you could see it reloads. That's an improvement. Say, how does the Joomla toolbar work? If you have a form, you normally just can submit it once with one task. And for that we have this field with an empty value. When I click on a toolbar button, Joomla sets a task in here and then submits the form. So we can look at the new button. Let's go straight away. Do that. It's a bit tiny probably. Can you say thank you, inspector? That's why I'm using Chrome, by the way. Do we really have to go like that? It's hilarious. Okay. Oh no, it's fine. Yeah, the search at least is working. It's too tiny probably. I can't. This is inspector. I can't zoom on that. Yeah, you can?
Yeah.
How? Ooh, didn't even know that. Interesting that Firefox says that. So we have that button toolbar on that. We have a button toolbar new. And here's the button, the actually thingy. And we have an inline JavaScript here, sadly still, because inline JavaScript is not a good idea at all. And if we look at the inline JavaScript, it's Joomla.submit button, add. And what Joomla does now is putting add in our hidden field in the task. So we have a task add, but we didn't create anything of that. So maybe we change the task a bit. Maybe, what do we want to add new? A rock, okay. A thanks? No, a rock. For that, we set a task, and a task can contain only on a word. So if I change that to whatever like that, we're going to see in a second. I hope it's going to remember that the task changed here to whatever I put in there. And when I click on that now, it's still nothing going to happen because we don't have that task. We also need a controller, and you can define the controller before that by putting a dot in front. So we're going to add rock.add. And what happens now is, when I click now on new, we see an error occurred. Invalid controller name rock. See, Joomla splits on the dot. What this means is rock is a controller, add is a task. See, and we don't have a controller called rock. We have one single controller so far, and it's called JWC controller. And this is the reason we get an error here. So how do we fix that? We are finally going to add our first controller. So we add a controller directory. And here we don't have subfolders. We directly put files in here. And in our case, we asked for a controller called rock, not a directory. Good morning. And as our previous controller, we are again extending the functionality. We are going to call it JWC17 controller. And now we need to use the word rock. It's always predefined what these things are going to be named. And we are going to extend JController legacy again. So we are still now going to get a new error. JWC17 view not found. Okay, I really hate Firefox. So we click on new and we get a new error, different. And why do we get that? Because it automatically redirects when it does not find the task. So the task was add. And to add a task or to implement the task we want to do, we just create a public function in here, call it add, and to show that I'm just going to add die in a controller here. And now let's click on that button again. And you see, we're in a controller. So what's executed now is the task add in the controller rock. That's an important thing to remember because that's not an easy one, for sure. So we click on the button, and in this controller rock, we could do whatever we want now. So what else can we show? We didn't show language files for now, but I can make it easy by using some language Joomla has. And for outputting translated language, it's really easy in Joomla. You just do echo jtext underscore, and then you put in the translation string in here. And in our case, it would be JWC17. That's always a prefix. You always need to use that in the component. And after that, what you want to translate. And this string now would go into a language file. As we are in the administrator folder, it needs to be below it. So let's mirror Joomla here and do languages engb. And in that, we create a file called engb.com/jwc17.ini. Everyone in that room worked with a language file before, or at least has seen one. Yeah, it's a serious question. So in this, we can now take this language string and just translate it. And I didn't create the symlinks for these files yet, as I would be translated by now. For now, we're just seeing, I'm still in the controller, which is a bad thing. Because of that, we're still seeing that. And I could now do again, link, put a command line, go to the command line, link the language file, and you know that's annoying. And that's why I again suggest you to look at the Joomla project, because it's really helping with all these things you want. Joomla brings a lot of default and translated stuff with it. For example, what could we use? JS. Oh, I wanted to use JTitle, but okay. We can put in JS here, and when we look at that now, No. Great. We have a JS here, and it would be translated in any language the user is using. So this is easy. It's the same in models and plugins, just the naming scheme of the language files would be different. So, how much time left?
15 minutes.
Okay. So, what would you like to see in 15 minutes? Anything you...
Helper files.
Hmm?
Helper files.
What? Helper?
files.
Helper files?
Yeah.
That's boring. Helper files? Why would you...
At least 3 different ways that people are doing it in Joomla. It would be nice to know 8 ways to do it.
There is no general way to do that. Everyone does it like... I can show you a helper file, it's no issue. For that we are going to create a totally random name directly, helpers. It's not set in Joomla. You can do whatever you want to have helper files. It's no standards, there's no definition like with model, view and controller. And I'm going to create a helper. How do we call it? I call it Philip. And now we're going to create a class, because you always want to work object oriented. Never create functions in Joomla. We are not WordPress. So we're going to create a helper called JWC17 helper Philip. And what can the helper do? Any nice ideas? Where do you need help with?
Are you using for like API controls, or I'm going to be using the same API call?
Okay, that's... Can we have something easy with?
Please.
In helpers, in most of the times, that's the definition of a helper, you do static methods, because else you would need to create the new object. In view model controller, Joomla does that for us. We never type new XY in there, except in Joomla 4. There you're going to do exactly that. See, still no ideas what we can help them with. Then we call it go to bed. Too late. And we're just going to return Philip is going to bed. That's it. That's our static helper. So if I try to use that now in the view, we're going to have an issue. But let's see, look at that. So let's see what JWC helper go to bed is now going to bring us. An error. What, Mr. Dings?
Show something about traits and mixes.
No.
Now first fix this error, please. Include.
Say JWC17 helper Philip not found. Because in all the steps before, Joomla did the auto-loading. We didn't do that. Normally in PHP you are forced to do include, require once, all that funny things, you know them probably. In Joomla we have something for that. And we can do it the following. In our entry file we are going to do jloader discover class prefix is JWC17 helper, and then we're going to add the path to our helper folder. I'm going to explain this constant in a sec. And that's it. And let's see if the auto loading works now. And it does. The cool thing is, what we did here is we used the jloader discover to load all files or all classes which are prefixed with JWC17 helper and which are in the folder helpers. So you can now easily create new ones and you don't have to take care of the auto loading every time. If you want to do only one, there's also jloader register. This is doing them one by one. See, now I need to show you another thing, because we use JPass Component Administrator. This is one of the few constants. Everyone knows what a constant is. A constant is a thing that's not changed but defined in the entry of the application. And these are defined by Joomla to make your life easier. Because what I could have written in PHP 2 would be, I could do there and whatever, but you are not always in the path. Especially when you're trying to access helpers from the front end. You would need to go dir name, you would need to go up and then go to the administrator folder again and so on. Joomla does that for you. And we have a lot of constants for that. They all start with JPass underscore. And JPass component administrator is always changing depending on the component you are calling, which is not always a good thing, but it's quite handy to use. All the other ones here are fixed. JPass root is always having the slash, the main, in it. JPass administrator is always having the administrator folder in it. JPass components is always having the normal components, not administrator, but normal components folder in it. And the same for a lot of other things. So with these constants, you can save a lot of time. So, that's our helper. Philip is going to bed. Yeah, I should do that too. Yeah.
I don't know if we can show that in some minutes, but can you show an example of model? So how to add some data or manage some data?
It's a bit too short for that. That's why I skipped that. I can show you how to create a model and how to use it without loading data, because else we need to create a table or user existing one. That's a bit far for that. To have a model, yeah, we need a folder models. And if you remember the definition of a model is there for the data and processing of data. It's a backend. In a nice word, all the stuff we do like tasks, save, all the communication with the database and so on would be handled in the model and only in the model. But we are not in a nice word, so it quite often happens that we do the stuff in the controller too. Never do it in the view. That's a no-go. But let's make an example for a model. Model is called again like the view. You follow the view again, so in our case it's rocks. And there are different types of models. I'm going to show the easiest one, so I'm going to create a model again. And the naming scheme is again the same like as for views and controllers. So we're going to have a model JWC17. The word model here, that's the next prefix. And now we are going to have it called rocks. It's always the same pattern. Extension name, type, actual name. So JWC17 model rocks, we're going to extend a class again. In this case, we're going to extend JModel legacy. In Joomla, the model is the one thing which has multiple to choose from for different things to do. If you want to display a list, for example, like articles, there's the model JModel list. If you want to display a form, there's also a model for that, JModel form. So it's the most split one. JModel legacy is the easiest or most compact one. It's not big. And here I can define functions again. I'm running out of ideas for sure. Now save is stupid. Get Victor. Why not? So, and we're going to return Victor, of course. He's not here, no, he's hiding. So, in a model, you have the business logic, the communication with the database, and a lot of other stuff. And the model is easy to get. In the view, you now can get it with model equals this. Get model. And if you do it like that, it automatically loads the model which matches the view name. So they are always linked. You can also get a model, any model everywhere, which has a different name. For that you would use JModel Legacy. So normally they are coupled, controller model view is coupled, but it does not need to. It's nice if it is, but it is no must-have. And then we can call, a nice hint by the way, you don't have any code completion now. So we are not, if I'm typing model, you have nothing here because the IDE does not now model. But we can tell the IDE what that is with a doc comment. And we can now say this is JW17 model rocks. And when I do that again, we see all the methods our model offers, including getVictor. See, what can we do with Victor? Okay. See, now comes an interesting step. We are not using the model in the default PHP, but we're using it in Vue. How do we get data from here to the default PHP? Because I don't want to do an echo here. That's stupid. So for that, it's quite easy. You're just using this, and then you can put in anything you want. So we are going to assign this Victor is model getVictor. And now in the template, we can use, I should make some new lines maybe. We can use echo this Victor. Let's take a look at the result. And there we have it. That's a model. That's the basic thing a model does. In Joomla there are more models, I said that already. If you want to query database, etc., there are nice models prepared for that which save you work. Of course you can now just do a database connection and get data there too, but this is not the way to go. Joomla has some nice made up models for that. To support also filtering and other things. Because when we add content again, we have a third box here. We have a lot of filters in here. And for that we have ready to use models, which make it quite easy to have filters like that too. Where you're building the query which matches what the user selected. That's going to save a lot of time too. So I would say, do we have room for 2 minutes maybe? Any other questions? A short one.
Will you put that on GitHub or something? I'm not sure if the all code is being seen by the video.
I can put that.
That would be great. Just so
Okay. Okay. Then thank you very much for doing. I know it has been a rough start and it was